partisan. I have to tell you that there are some Democrats, for example, who represent states or districts that are heavily reliant on old power plants and are more heavily manufacturing based. And the truth is that if you produce power using old power plants, you're going to be emitting more carbon, but to upgrade those plants means energy is going to be a little bit more expensive, at least on the front end. At the core, we have to do something that's really difficult for any society to do, and that is to take actions now where the benefits are going to be coming down the road, or at least we're going to be avoiding big problems down the road. And it's hard when people are thinking day to day about bread and butter issues. That's true in our own lives. It's true as a society in the whole. What I'm optimistic about is that we can continue to make progress without slowing economic growth. And the same steps that we took with respect to energy efficiency on cars, we can take on buildings, we can take on appliances. We can make sure that new power plants that are being built are more efficient than the old ones. And we can continue to put research and our support behind clean energy that is going to continue to help us transition away from dirtier fuels. And you know, we've made progress, but I've got to tell you, John, I wish I could say that you know, the way Washington works, that it's a rational, reasoned, policy wonk conversation where you would, you know, be very comfortable. That's not what motivates folks a lot of times around here. What motivates folks is getting reelected, and for a lot of members of Congress, what they're responding to is a public that is still not entirely convinced that this is an urgent problem. And part of my job, I think, is to use the bully pulpit to help raise people's awareness, because if the public cares about it, eventually Congress acts. If the public doesn't care about it, it's very hard to get big stuff done because, you know, legislators respond to their constituents sooner or later.
Kira, did you want to?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, just on this subject of government and how Washington works, I've been thinking about this a lot because I do remember clearly in 2008 you ran on a platform of really trying to become one of the most transparent administrations in American history. However, with recent leaked guidelines regarding drone strikes on American citizens and Benghazi and closed-door hearings on the budget and deficit, it just feels a lot less transparent than I think we had all hoped it would be. How has the reality of the presidency changed that promise, and what can we do moving forward to kind of get back to that promise?
Well, actually, on a whole bunch of fronts, we've kept that promise. This is the most transparent administration in history, and you know, I can document how that is the case. Everything from every visitor that comes into the White House is now part of the public record. That's something that we changed. Just about every law that we pass, every rule that we implement, we put online for everybody there to see. There are a handful of issues, mostly around national security, where people have legitimate questions, where they're still concerned about whether or not we have all the information we need. Benghazi, by the way, is not a good example of that. That was largely driven by campaign stuff, because everything about that, we've had more testimony and more paper provided to Congress than ever before, and Congress is sort of running out of things to ask. But when it comes to things like you know, how we conduct counterterrorism, there are legitimate questions there, and we should have that debate. And what I've tried to do coming into office was to create a legal and a policy framework that respected our traditions and our rule of law, but some of these programs are still classified, which meant that we might have shared them, for example, with the Congressional Intelligence Office, but they're not on the front page of the papers or on the web.
But Mr. President, in response to that question that Kira just asked regarding drones, a lot of people are very concerned that your administration now believes it's legal to have drone strikes on American citizens, and whether or not that's specifically allowed with citizens within the United States? And if that's not true, what will you do to create a legal framework to make American citizens within the United States know that drone strikes cannot be used against American citizens?
Well, first of all, I think there's never been a drone used on an American citizen on American soil. And we respect and have a whole bunch of safeguards in terms of how we conduct counterterrorism operations outside of the United States. The rules outside the United States are going to be different than the rules inside the United States, in part because our capacity to, for example, capture terrorists in the United States are very different than in the foothills or mountains of Afghanistan or Pakistan. But what I think is absolutely true is that it is not sufficient for citizens to just take my word for it that we're doing the right thing.
So what do you believe you should do?
I am the head of the executive branch, and what we've done so far is to try to work with Congress on oversight issues. But part of what I'm going to have to work with Congress on is to make sure that whatever it is that we're providing Congress, that we have mechanisms to also make sure that the public understands what's going on, what the constraints are, what the legal parameters are, and that's something that I take very seriously. I am not somebody who believes that the president has the authority to do whatever he wants or whatever she wants whenever they want, just under the guise of counterterrorism. There have to be legal checks and balances on it.
Mr. President, before we let everyone